Okay. I'm on to the last section. Section 6, Shattered. And then the mind let go and peace followed. Chapter 24, Tinker Bell Vanishes. Jody swore she could hear the tiny buzzing that always came right before they appeared. Her reality let her believe that any second, dozens of fairies would start to dart around the rainbow that hovered on the brink of her sanity. She could even feel the twitching in her back that let her know her wings were trying to grow in. If only her family would just leave her alone. For weeks, everyone had watched her like she was an anomaly in a zoo. Dela walked around her with a cautious look on her face that resembled a frightened deer looking for an escape route. Lexi stayed in her room and wouldn't come out even to eat. Audra watched her every move like a prison warden, forever counting her pills. On her more lucid days, Jody could feel the change in the air. After the episode with Tony, Doug had been more volatile than normal. Since Dougie J's death, she'd noticed he wasn't as careful about what he said in public to her as he used to be. If not for the girl's presence, he knew his desire to smash something would transpire into physical destruction. She could tell he was trying to keep himself in check around them, but figured it was just a matter of time. When they were alone, his anger turned into spiteful accusations or warning threats. Jody, I can see right through your crazy routine and you'd better snap out of it or else. Jody, you're doing this on purpose to gain sympathy. Don't you think I'm hurting as much as you are? Jody, you're being very selfish. I'm fed up with your self-pity. You're embarrassing me in front of my friends. Archer won't even come over anymore. He uses the excuse that he's in the middle of hockey season, but we both know the real reason. Jody this, Jody that, Jody. God, she was beginning to hate her own name. Audra had begun watching her as she took her pills, not allowing her to leave the kitchen until she watched her swallow them, and even following her into the bathroom. Jody hated the emotion-killing pills. They made her feel sluggish and sleepy. Her mind couldn't function, she couldn't feel, she couldn't live. When she took the pills, the fairies didn't appear, and the purple hue surrounding the clouds faded away into the gray sadness of the winter sky. She had found a way to fool Audra, though, and keep from swallowing the mood-altering poison. She started paying attention to when it was time to take the medicine and made sure to always beat Audra into the kitchen. She would make sure to grab a white plastic cup, one of the little opaque ones they'd gotten once when a carnival was in town. Then, when Audra handed her the pills and watched as she put them in her mouth, she would swallow a small amount of water to show she had actually swallowed something, but she'd hold the pill under her tongue and very surreptitiously spit the pill into the remaining water. When Audra was praising her for being a good little pill popper, like she was some 4-year-old, she'd quickly dump the rest of the water down the drain, pill and all. Everyone thought she had finally resigned to taking the nasty things and started to comply with their whims of changing her, but she had them all fooled. Oh, sometimes she got stuck into actually swallowing the medicine, like the time Lexi was washing a stick of celery at the sink, and by the time she could get water in her cup, the pill had dissolved under her tongue. But those were times that were few and far between. Spring had decided to hide behind the white skirt of winter, afraid in its infancy of showing independence. The sky maintained its color of Minnesota gray, which obscured any feelings of rebirth and made loneliness the lead actor in nature's production. Jody stood at the kitchen window watching the approaching dawn. Feeling the usual anticipation she knew would come with seeing the first glimpse of shimmering wings on the remaining snow. That told her the fairies were awake. She had found Tinker Bell on the table the day Tony had visited her, and knew this tiny fairy was the lifeline to Dougie J. She kept the doll in the pockets of her sweaters or her robe or jeans at all times. Her routine had changed since Tony had found her in the garden. She had to hide the fairy's existence from doubting eyes, as well as her own fairy personality. It was a fine patina of illusion she preferred over the more painful reality of life. Her family seemed afraid of the changes in her, so she knew she had to keep this fragile world to herself. Since that day, she began forcing herself to wake up before Doug every morning in order to close the back door. The door she would get up just after midnight to open to let the fairies come in to warm themselves before they went back out to play. Midnight under the moon was the fairies' most active time. She didn't know how she knew this. She just did. She figured it was her innate spirit coming forth. The first morning Doug had awoken before her, he had discovered the door open and the temperature in the house dropped by 20 degrees. He'd gotten so angry at her he threatened to nail the door shut, warning her that if she didn't straighten up, he'd have her committed, gossip or not. After that, she started setting the alarm clock at 11:55 every night and putting it under her pillow so Doug couldn't hear it when it went off. She'd get up when the alarm sounded, go into the kitchen and crack the door open by setting a small rock on the floor, return to bed and set the alarm again for 5 in the morning, in time to get up, close the door again, and warm up the house before Doug got up at 6. Things seemed different this day, however. It was 6:40 in the morning and Doug hadn't yet come into the room. The girls were still asleep. The house was quiet. Not wanting to think why this was, she opened the door again and stood in front of it, letting the frigid air cool her blistered soul and cleanse her of troubled dreams. Dreams of Dougie J calling her as he flew with fairies just out of reach. Dreams she had night after night. Dreams that confused her and made her head hurt. She stared out at the yard as the glitter on the snow mesmerized her. The twinkling sparkles seemed to be talking to her in some silent musical song. The pain from her dream started to fade, so she walked a little farther out the door, her mind snagging on the possibility that maybe the dreams weren't dreams after all, but a reality only she could understand. It was the fairies, she realized, the fairies that glittered in the snow trying to calm her. They knew of the dreams, her mind rationalized. They were trying to help her, telling her Dougie J was safe and with them. They'd take her to him if she'd only follow. Pulled by their brilliancy, she followed the tiny glittery lights with her eyes, as if across the palomino-covered yard to where it fell over the fence, through the gap in the wilted winter shrubs, down to the pale blue of the river that she could just see through the bare growth of the tree branches. A sudden gust of wind blew through the door and brushed the hair across her face. She mistook the light breeze fanning her ears for the voices of the fairies calling her. The musical buzzing slaked the suffocating pressure of the house, beckoning her. She slipped out the door toward the lights flitting across the river, knowing they were skating on top of the water and calling her in the whisper of the breeze. Walking across the yard, she continued outside the gate, crossed the running path, and headed into the morning shadows of the tangled brush and twigs that rimmed the bank of the river. The ground was soft from the wet morning dew and melting snow, unaware that her only protection from the lingering winter was thin terry slippers and robe. She walked blindly on, concentrating on the shimmering lights. Knowing the fairies were leading her to Dougie J, she hurried her pace. Her robe snagged on the burrs of a sumac, causing her to trip on an above-ground root. She pulled the robe roughly from around her legs. Irritated it was hampering her journey, she took it off and left it dangling from a branch. She had to hurry because she knew that fairies were forever evanescent. Thankful for the freedom from the now discarded robe, she made her way faster toward the river as cruel fingers of leafless branches scratched her face and arms, the muddy water soaking through her slippers. Walking forward, intent on her quest, she never looked back at the soft blue robe tangle itself with the leaves. She also never saw the tiny Tinkerbell doll fall from the pocket to be forever buried under those same dead leaves. Lexi awoke at 7:15 in the morning. It was early for a Saturday, but it was going to be an important day, and she was anxious about the outcome. Today was a day she was telling her parents she wanted to live with Grandma and Grandpa Warren for the summer at least. Her grandparents weren't going to be at the house until noon to help her explain her reasons for wanting to live with them, but she was too excited to stay in bed. Since her little brother's death, the house had felt confining and cold. Her parents hardly talked. Audra was always at some school function, and Dayla was still young enough to be a royal pain. She knew in order to conquer her eating disorder, because she knew she had one, she had to escape the trauma of home in order to deal with the emotional reasons behind her illness. She had spoken to the school nurse and read brochures. She knew it was a disease, but it was one she was determined to cure on her own. First, though, she had to take care of the emotional upheaval that was causing it in the first place. She walked into the kitchen ready to deal once again with the lost look in her mother's eyes. the look which made it too painful to live at home anymore. It was that constant, tortured look that made her feel sorry for her mom, but want to hide from her at the same time. She missed her brother more than she could ever have imagined, so she could comprehend to some extent what her mom and dad were going through. Having one less traumatized person in the house would only help, she rationalized. Walking into the kitchen, the cold air hit her senses, causing her to take a sharp intake of air. Looking around, it took a moment to see the reason why. The back door was standing open. She froze in place, more out of confusion than concern. She walked slowly to the door as if she was afraid something was going to jump out and say boo. Instinct told her something was wrong, as freezing air sucked stability out of the door along with the warmth. The air on her arms started rising unexpectedly from an innate fear. "Mom?" she called tentatively. Letting her eyes follow the sound of wood banging against metal, she watched the back gate swing slightly open and closed. Thinking the wind had caused the latch on the gate to pop open, she quickly scanned the backyard out of natural curiosity. As she stood looking out at the empty space of morning, an uneasy feeling nestled against the nape of her neck and kept her from closing the door against the cold. Audra walked into a cold kitchen, still half asleep. Wrapping her robe tighter around her middle, she stopped mid-stride to scold her younger sister. "Lexi, what are you doing? Close the door for Pete's sake. It's freezing in here." Lexi responded to her sister without turning around. "Audie," she asked, using her pet name for her sister, "is Mom in her room?" "No, I just passed their room, and Dad told me to tell Mom to put the coffee on." "Why?" "Because she wasn't in the kitchen when I got up, and when I came in, the door was standing open." "Wait, what?" Lexi could hear the slow panic begin in her sister's question. "God, do you think she went outside again?" "I don't know, but she's not in the backyard either. What do you think we should do?" "Should we get Dad?" "No, let's look around first and make sure she just isn't in another part of the house. You check the office, I'll look in the garage. And close the door before Dad gets in here, or he's going to freak." Lexi proceeded to obey her sister when, not knowing why, her eyes scanned the dark recesses of the mesh of branches she could see over the fence. A flutter of blue that seemed out of place on that gray morning caught her attention. "Wait, Audie, wait," stopping her sister before she could leave the room. "What is it? I see something in the woods." Walking to her sister's side, Audra asked, "Where?" "There," she replied as she pointed in front of her. "Look over the fence." Like two sentries standing side by side, the sisters gazed at the blue that hung on a brown branch 30 yards away, fluttering like a forsaken flag. As they stared at the soft baby blue, trying to determine what it could be, a glint of sun caught the blonde movement of a head farther between the twigs and branches. "Oh God, Lexi, look!" Audra exclaimed with alarm in her voice. "Look in the water. I think it's Mom." Lexi followed her sister's outstretched arm and pointing finger. "It is Mom. She's in the river. We got to tell Dad," she cried as she started to run. "No, wait," Audra commanded, stopping her by the arm. "You go next door and get Tony. I'll go get Mom." "Why? We should tell Dad first." "No, believe me, if he sees her in the water, he is going to completely flip out. You weren't here when Tony found her outside digging in the mud, and I thought Dad was going to go ballistic. We're going to need help dealing with him when he finds out about this, and help with Mom when we get her in the house. Tony will know what to do, and maybe Dad won't get so angry with someone else in the house." "Okay, but hurry. No telling how long she's been in the river," Lexi said as she ran to get Tony. Chapter 25. The Truth is Cold. It had been 2 hours since they had dragged Jody out of the river. Tony sat in an armchair of the worn living room drinking hot tea, willing the warmth to return to her body as the icy cold of the Mississippi water persisted in permeating to the marrow of her bones. The morning events had set off a disjointed mound of chaos. Audra had called her grandparents. They in turn called another family member, who then called another, until the group had escalated into a full-blown intervention. Tony watched from the outer fray as the Warren and Olson families faced off in a much heated circle as they discussed Jody's fate like bidders at an auction. Kate Olson: "Where is she now?" Audra: "She's in bed, Grandma. As soon as we got her out of the river, we put her in a tub to warm her up and put her to bed. She was freezing." Joe Olson: "What the hell was she doing in the river?" "We don't know. All she said was fairies were taking her to find Dougie J." Nora: Fairies? What are you talking about? Lexi. Mom said she saw fairies on the water and they were leading her to Dougie. She kept saying her name was Blink. Grace Warren. Oh my God, she's lost her mind. George Warren. Now, Mother, let's not think the worst. Nora. Who the hell is Blink? Audra. It's the name she said the fairies gave her. Bridget. Great, now she's a fairy. I think that pretty much said she's losing it. Katie Olson. She probably just needs more medicine. Doug. Oh, for God's sake, forget about the damn fairies. It's something she's been talking about for months. Ever since Dougie J's accident, she's been carrying around that stupid Tinkerbell doll he used to play with. I should have thrown it away a long time ago. I didn't know she was going to start talking to it. Nora. Obviously she needs a hospital. Bridget. Or a loony bin. Nora. Oh, nice, Bridget. Way to be sensitive. Audra. Aunt Bridget, I don't think Mom needs a loony bin, she said, indicating air quotes. But I do think you might be right. I think she needs professional help. Nora. You should be in a psych ward for evaluation if you ask me. Doug. Now hold on just a minute. Listen, I don't care what anyone says. No wife of mine is being admitted to some insane asylum. Nora. No one said anything about an insane asylum. God, what year are you living in? We're talking about a hospital, and you can't tell me after this morning that it's not what she needs. Lexi. Dad, please, Mom is sick. She needs help. Grace Warren. Doug, honey, I know this is hard, but if they hadn't found her when they did, she could have frozen to death or drowned. Audra. By the time we found her, she had walked clear up to her waist. She didn't even seem to be aware of the cold. Joe Olson. Doug may be right. He is her husband after all. Besides, you always feel better when you're in your own home. George Warren. And who's going to watch her? Isn't this the second or third time she's done something like this? Katie. I'm sorry, but my Jody don't need no doctor telling her she's crazy. She just needs time to figure things out, don't you know? She's grieving and a little alone time will do her good. Lexi. Grandma, she was in the river. Audra. That's right, and she was literally shaking by the time we got her out. In fact, if it hadn't been for Tony, I don't know if we could have gotten her out by ourselves. As if on cue, everyone turned and looked at Tony. Audra. Tony, don't you think Mom should go to a hospital? The question brought Tony out of her wary watchfulness. Yes, I do, if for no other reason than to be checked out for hypothermia. But as a victim advocate, do you think Mom needs a psychiatric hospital? I'm not family. It's not my place to say one way or the other. But as her friend. Interrupting, Doug said, That's right, she's not family and she doesn't have a vote. Tony turned quickly and looked at Doug. Standing up, she stood directly in front of him, derision darkening her eyes. You're right, Doug. I don't have a right to say anything. But as I was saying, as her friend, I care about her, and I think she needs more help than a regular doctor can give her. Listen, Tony, I appreciate you being there when you were, but this really should be discussed in private. I don't mean to be rude, but maybe it would be best if you left us alone for now. This just isn't your field of expertise. Tony was shaking on the inside. Doug's condescending tone had anger working itself up her legs into her neck. Jerk, she thought. And if he says listen one more time, I'm going to deck him. She knew it was a habit of his, but habit or not, she knew he used it as a way to get attention from everyone around him, just by commanding them to listen. It certainly seemed to work with his family at any rate. Audra. Dad, Tony is our friend. Doug, son, I think we're all fine if Tony stays. We can use all the help we can get. Nora. Oh, for Pete's sake, Doug, stop being so mule-headed. And you are being rude. Tony already knows everything, so what will it hurt if she stays? She may have insight into things we don't. Nora plopped down in a chair with ceremonious decisiveness, as if her word was final. Speaking to the group, but staring at Nora, Doug said, Fine, she can stay. But listen, everyone, I appreciate you trying to help, but Jody'll be fine. They just need to increase her dose of medicines, that's all. Tony clenched her fist at the word listen, screaming in her head and biting her tongue to stay quiet. Nora challenged her brother-in-law. I think it's a little more serious than a few pills. Besides, you know as well as anyone how fragile Jody has always been. Listen, I'm her husband and I think I know what's best. I mean, can you imagine what my boss would say if he found out Jody was admitted into a hospital for psychiatric reasons? I'd never be promoted again. What? Did I just hear him right? Tony looked shockingly at each member of the family, waiting for someone to respond. Ignoring Tony, Joe Olson said, "Now see there, we need to think of Doug's work. Do we really want to risk his job over this?" George warned, "Now hold on a minute. We need to think about what's best for Jody, even if it means her going into a hospital for a while." A quiet lull momentarily quieted the room. Dayla walked to Doug and put her arms around his waist. "Daddy, is Mom going away?" "No, Dayla, your mom is not going away." Grace warned, "See what you all have done? You're upsetting the children." She went to her youngest granddaughter and wrapped her arms around her. Bridget, stretching her back as if the whole ordeal exhausted her, said with a tired exhale of breath, "Has anyone thought that maybe she's doing this just for the attention?" "Excuse me?" Tony bit out with sarcastic disbelief. Like a politician speaking before her constituents, Bridget placed her hands on the back of a chair to speak. Everyone stopped talking and turned to look at her, as if immense wisdom was going to spew from her mouth. "I just think everyone should stop coddling her. I mean, I know how hard this must be for her, losing Dougie J and all, but it was months ago. Don't they say that time heals all wounds? If we all stopped jumping every time she decides to act a little nutty, maybe she'd stop doing things like this." Anger caused goosebumps to rise on Tony's skin. Katie Olson interrupting quickly, "Bridget, dear, this isn't something you can just let go of." "Oh, for the love of Pete, Mother, I know that, but you got to stop babying her." "Bridget, you don't know what you're talking about. Jody needs a hospital. You know she's always been the weakest of the three of us," Nora stated with authority. "But even so, I can't believe you think that she's going to get better in a few months after losing a child." "I didn't say that. I'm just saying—" "Doug, okay, everyone. Let's just calm down." Grace warned, "You all know that Dougie's birthday is in just a few weeks. What do you think she's going to do when that day rolls around?" The family went silent as Tony watched the expressions change on individual faces one by one. Joe Olson, "We don't need to think about that now." Bridget, "I think we just don't let her focus on it when the day comes and wallow around in self-pity." Tony, bristling, took a step toward Bridget. She was stopped in her tracks by Doug's next statement. "Bridget has a point. Maybe we need to stop overreacting with every change in Jody's behavior. Besides, has everyone forgotten that Dougie J was my son too? I also lost a child, if you'll remember. You don't think I'm also hurting? I mean, there are days I can barely get out of bed for the pain, but I have other responsibilities that I have to consider. I don't have the luxury of sleeping away half the day or wandering off to reflect. I have no choice but go on." Grace Warren, releasing her hold on her youngest granddaughter, lunged for her son. "Oh, baby, you're right. We've completely overlooked that fact." George Warren, "Son, we're sorry. We know you're hurting too." Doug, "Well, yeah." He bowed his head in a sheepish manner. Tony watched Doug's transformation in amazement as he laid his head on his mother's shoulder like a shy little boy. Suddenly, like everyone had just been invited to Doug's pity party, the whole family turned their attention to him. Bridget, "Oh, Doug, I don't know what we were thinking. This must be so hard for you." She placed her hand on his back and rubbed it in small, gentle circles. Joe Olson, walking up to the huddle trio, said, "Doug, my boy, I know Jody can be a burden. What can we do to help?" "Dad, I'm so sorry," Audra cried as she ran to her father's side. "I forgot how hard this is for you, too." Lexi joined her sister. "Daddy, I'm sorry, too." Dayla ran to be included, squeezing herself between her grandmother and her dad. "Doug, my boy, we all miss him. You know that." George Warren placed his large hand on his son's head like a preacher offering solace. "Doug, you know Jody's going to be okay. Don't you fret none." Nora relented her initial assault on her brother-in-law. "Dad's right. Let us help." Tony watched in stunned silence as the family gathered into a large group hug of bodies and tears as they crooned over Doug. Doug, raising his head so he could be heard, answered Nora in the most pitiful voice Tony had ever heard. "It just helps to know that I have family I can lean on. You don't know what it means to me that you'll all drop everything at a moment's notice just to come and listen to my problems." "Oh, for the love of," Tony thought. George Warren, "Well, that's why we're here, son, and I think we have a solution." Grace Warren, "Yes, now don't get upset, but we want to take Lexi for the summer. I think it would be good for both her and Jody. And She would be one less person you would have to worry about. What? Why? When did you come up with this? Doug stammered. Well, Lexi called us a few weeks ago and asked if she could. I think it's a good idea. Doug turned his attention to his middle daughter as he disentangled himself from the massive family. Lexi? Daddy, I want to do this. Doug, his father explained, there's a clinic up around us that we want to put Lexi in. It's an eating disorder clinic that we think can help her. She wants to do this, and I think it's very mature of her. We'll even pay for it. Eating disorder? She doesn't have an eating disorder. She's just a little thin, I grant you, but it's not a disorder. Daddy, Lexi said, bending her head as in shame. I passed out at school last month. What? Why didn't you tell me about this? With everything that's happened, I didn't want to bother you and Mom with it. I had them call Grandma Warren when it happened. Doug, his mother said, we've known about Lexi for a month or so now, and we've been talking to her school and think this is the best solution. Lexi continued for her grandmother. I've talked to a counselor at school, and I know I have a problem. Grandma and Grandpa said I could stay with them, and I could go to the clinic on an outpatient basis, if you'll agree. I want to get better, Dad. I need this. Audra, Dad, I think that's a great idea. I've known she's been throwing up for months now, but I'm ashamed to admit I haven't paid much attention to her from trying to keep up with Mom's medicine and school and college applications and all. Doug, wait, everyone just hold on. You're saying Lexi is what, anorexic or something? And that you've already talked to the school and the clinic? Why in the hell wasn't I told? We didn't want to add any more to your plate, son. Since Dougie J's funeral, the whole family has been in turmoil. We have a chance to take some of that worry from you, if at least for now and through the summer. The room went quiet as everyone waited for Doug to answer. Well, I suppose, he started, but school isn't out yet, and if she's as sick as you say... I'm not sick, I just have a small problem, Lexi interrupted fiercely. I just want to talk to a counselor. Okay, fine. If she wants to go and you've already talked to her school about it, then I assume it would be best if she went right away. Shouldn't she have gone before now? Couldn't, because it's taken us this long to get her scheduled and figure out all the logistics, George Warren explained. And my teachers have already said I can finish off the last month of school and finals by mail. Well, I guess I don't have much choice if I want you to get better, do I? Excuse me, Tony said, but don't all of you think that maybe Jody should be part of this decision? Jody? Doug said her name like she was a foreign being, unfamiliar and distant. Jody can't even take care of herself right now. She certainly can't make this decision. Audra, speaking quickly, Dad, I also want to leave for the summer. I want to get a summer job at the Mall of America. That way I can make money for college, and Mom won't have to worry about me being underfoot either. Bridget, I've already told her she can live with me. God, I feel like I'm losing control of my family. Is there anyone else who's made plans without asking me? Tony watched Doug hang his head in a show of sadness as his family oohed and awed over him. No, son, we're just trying to help. We know how hard this is for you. What about Dayla? Doug asked. I have to work, and I just don't think Jody is capable of watching her. Tony could have sworn she saw a spark in Doug's eyes at the prospect of not having to deal with his kids for the summer. It was like a light bulb actually materialized over his head from the glow on his face. Dayla, as if on cue, transformed from the sad, scared 3-year-old of minutes before to an exuberant teenager. Dad, I also want to go away this summer. There's a language camp up in Bemidji I want to go to with Amanda, and then her mom asked if I could go to South Dakota with them for a couple of weeks. Well, I don't know. Doug looked to be thinking, but Tony could tell he was thrilled with the news of having all his kids gone for the summer. She watched his self-pitying head dangling with disgust. Any second she expected him to kick the toe of his shoe against the carpet and say, golly gee, poor little me. She slightly shook her head, amazed at how blind everyone seemed to be of his charade. Nora said, and after she gets back from South Dakota, she can stay with us for the rest of the summer. That way she can spend time with her cousins. I'll even pay her to babysit. It will really help me out. Is that okay with you, Dayla? Yeah, that would be great, Dayla exclaimed. Joe Olson, well, it's all settled then. Tony stood stock still, watching the whole scene play out like a drama in a play. All settled? Tony thought furiously. How could everyone have forgotten the main reason they had gathered, which was to decide what to do about Jody? Is this what it's always been like for her? Being ignored, her needs taking a back seat to Doug's? She watched as the family broke apart and started jabbering excitedly about their individual plans. Doug had come alive under the family's attention, like all the cares of the world had been taking off him. She was about to shout at the whole lot of them when a small hiccup to her right caught everyone's attention. Jody stood in the shadow of the hall, eerily white in its darkness. Wide-eyed, she choked through a wall of unshed tears. You're taking my children away?" Tony ran to her side as Jody stumbled into the room. Everyone turned in surprise, their smiles frozen in place from their shared guilt. "Jody, what are you doing out of bed?" Doug scolded. Desperate, Jody reached for Doug like a starving beggar. "Doug, don't let them take my kids away." "Jody, baby, they aren't taking the kids away. They're just going to have a couple of weeks with the family so you can rest." "Mama, no. Please don't let them take them. I need my girls with me." Mr. Olson, walking up to his daughter, told her firmly, "Jody, I think we know what's best for you. You really haven't been yourself lately, and having some quiet in the house will give you time to get better. Now you need to stop making a scene and get back to bed." Jody fell silent and stared blankly at the short, stout man in front of her like she didn't quite recognize him. Tony watched emotions drift across Jody's sad hazel eyes as she weighed the consequences of her obeying her father or arguing. Holding her by the elbow, Tony saw a hurt in Jody's eyes like none she'd ever seen in any victim she'd ever encountered. She knew the second Jody made up her mind. Pulling her arm from Tony's hold, she ran to Lexi and wrapped her arms around her daughter's shoulders. Lexi, baby, I'm so sorry you're sick. I didn't know. I'm so sorry. Please, baby, please, don't leave me. I'll be better, I promise." "Mom," Lexi stumbled backward. "Mom, it's not you," she said as she tried to pry her mother's arms off her shoulders. Lexi looked over to her sister for help and fear written in her pupils. Audra ran to her sister. Mom, let go, okay?" Audra whispered into her mother's ear as she gently loosened her hold. "Lexi isn't leaving forever, just for a few weeks. Grandma and Grandpa Warren are going to help her." Jody switched her attention from Lexi to Audra. "Audra, you don't want to leave me, do you? Can't you get work around here somewhere? The mall is so far away. When will I ever see you?" "It's only 40 minutes away. I can come home on my days off, and it will allow me to make money for college. Remember, don't you, that I'll be leaving for college in the fall?" "College?" Jody tasted the word as if it was an unknown flavor. Jody, you need to calm down. Everybody is just trying to help," Katie Olson said, the stress always causing her accent to thicken. "No, they aren't. They're trying to take my kids away, just like they took Dougie J away. They took him away, and I can't find him." A collective gasp sucked the air from the room. The family backed away from Jody like she had a contagious disease, leaving her standing alone in the middle of the room. "Jody," Nora stated bluntly, "Dougie J wasn't taken away by anyone. He died." "What?" Jody looked at her sister with pure hatred in her eyes. "What did you just say?" The look had Nora back further away and clutched the closest person to her. "Answer me. What did you just say?" Jody shouted. "Jody, stop this. Stop it this minute," Doug yelled. Jody stopped immediately and cowered next to Tony, as if Doug had taken a whip and flogged her. Wrapping her arms around Jody's trembling frame, Tony studied what had just happened, taking in the scene in its entirety. She was seeing the truth of this family for the first time. Joel Olson's officious demands, Bridget's blunt cruelty, the whole family physically distancing themselves, Doug's harsh tone. A thought passed through Tony's mind like lightning, so fast she wasn't sure what it was. Something important, something vital, something that explained everything, something that washed over her and made her blood cold. Before she could concentrate and try to recapture the moment, Dayla spoke. "Mommy, are you okay?" Hearing Dayla's timid voice brought Jody to attention. Running to her daughter, Jody knelt in front of her, as a parishioner would at a Catholic altar. Grabbing both of her hands, she cried, "Oh, my baby, you want to stay with Mommy, don't you?" Dayla turned her confusion to her father. "Daddy?" Jody, get back to bed this instant. You're scaring her, Doug ordered. Tony went to Jody and bending over her took hold of her shoulders. Jody, please try and stay calm. I promise no one is going to take the girls from you. I won't let them. They just want to go someplace new for the summer and have some fun. Don't you want them to have fun? Jody looked up at Tony without ever moving her head, her eyes independent of her face, giving Tony an eeriness she'd never felt before. Fun? Jody asked. Yes, that's right. They just want to have fun for the summer. Jody pulled away from her daughter. Yes, that would be nice. They need to have some fun. Standing up, Jody brushed her robe down like it were a gown made of delicate chiffon. Clapping her hands together, she looked around the room and said at large, Well, we'd better get you packed, hadn't we? Walking to the hall closet, Jody opened the door and said, Dayla, don't forget to pack your swimsuit. And Lexi, you should take a sweater. You never know when it'll get cold. Oh, she chuckled. Remember that time it snowed the end of June? Wasn't that a sight? Jody continued to rummage through the closet where the winter coats were kept, mumbling to herself with her back to the room. Dayla, still standing with her hands outstretched as if her mother still held them, said to her father, Dad, what is she doing? I'm not going till after school is over. Dayla, hush, Audra scolded. After a few moments of letting Jody look for a swimsuit in a coat closet, Bridget stepped up and said firmly, This is exactly what I've been talking about. Everyone needs to stop enabling her. Jody, you stop pretending to be nuts this minute. You know damn well that school isn't out for another month. Bridget, stop. We don't know what this could do to her, Tony demanded, looking at Jody's back, watching as it stiffened. Oh, for pity's sake, she's only pretending. She knows perfectly well what's going on. Jody, turn around and look at me. Jody turned slowly, looking at her sister with a parka in her hands. Now you admit this minute, in front of God and everyone, that you've been doing all this just to get attention. Personally, I think you've always been jealous of the attention I've always gotten and want people to feel sorry for you, and this is the perfect opportunity to get it. I don't understand, Jody said. What opportunity are you talking about? Is something happening? Oh, Bridget gritted in frustration. Of course something is happening. You using Dougie J's death to get attention. Jody's face whitened even more, and with a sharp intake of breath, she whispered, Dougie J, and fell to her knees on the floor. Okay, end of that chapter, and I'll continue later. Bye.